Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer is the latest movie to be directed by Christopher Nolan, whose previous movies include Inception, Interstellar, Dunkirk, The Dark Knight Rises, and more recently Tenet. During World War II, General Leslie Groves, played by Robert Downey Jr., appoints physicist J. Robert Oppenheimer, played by Cillian Murphy, to work on the top-secret Manhattan Project. Oppenheimer and a team of scientists spent years developing and designing the atomic bomb. The world's first nuclear explosion takes place in 1945, forever changing the course of history. But the years that follow, Oppenheimer develops a guilty conscience and faces persecution for the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives. Okay. So this movie is based on historical facts. It is very dialogue heavy throughout, and unlike previous Christopher Nolan movies, especially Tenet, it doesn't contain any action sequences, emphasis on this movie being dialogue heavy from start to finish. It's really a character study of Oppenheimer, dubbed the father of the atomic bomb. So if you go to see this expecting the regular run-of-the-mill Christopher Nolan movie, chances are you'll be disappointed. This historical fact works brilliantly in the confines of a 3-hour movie, unlike the 2017 Tom Hanks Meryl Streep movie The Post, which might have worked in a factual TV documentary but completely fell apart in movie format. Yes, Oppenheimer's 3 hours long with no intermission, a 3-hour movie that's dialogue heavy, yet for some reason it doesn't feel like 3 hours, just a little over 2 hours. Despite being a relatively drastic departure from the regular run-of-the-mill Christopher Nolan movies, it is an instant classic and unquestionably is going to be a movie that'll be right up there with, say, the likes of Chariots of Fire and The Shawshank Redemption. The music score, composed by Swedish composer Ludwig Göransson, plays a major role, even an extra character in this movie, in that a scene that seems basic and harmless enough, but when overdubbed with an unnerving music score, is instrumental in changing the atmosphere of the movie. Oppenheimer has a star-studded cast. Emily Blunt, who's credible but way overqualified for the part. Florence Pugh, who despite having a limited amount of screen time, delivers one of the best performances of her career. Matt Damon, who surprisingly pushes the boat out to deliver a standout performance. Robert Downey Jr. elbows everyone out the way. Attention-seeking, just look how amazing I am in the scene sort of way. Rami Malek, who despite being extremely worthy of an Oscar as Freddie Mercury, has been delivering shocking, atrocious, diabolical performances post-Bohemian Rhapsody, i.e. James Bond film Amsterdam, and now this. I mean, is he taking the piss? Rami Malek should be placed up against a wall and shot, to be honest, for delivering the most horrific, diabolical performances ever seen. Gary Oldman, who is desperate to make an impression during his brief 1-minute cameo, and the list goes on and on and on. Which brings us to Cillian Murphy. Cillian Murphy is one of the best, most extraordinarily talented actors who first came to my attention 20 years ago in 28 Days Later, delivering a mind-blowing, off-the-Richter-scale performance, adding such charisma and presence to that movie. But in Oppenheimer, despite being extremely credible throughout, it seems that Cillian Murphy takes a back seat, allowing himself to be upstaged and overshadowed by the supporting cast. I mean, poor Cillian Murphy's mind must have gone into absolute shock, sharing the screen with the above-mentioned star-studded cast. But Christopher Nolan should have brought Cillian Murphy to one side and explained to him that the movie is called Oppenheimer, with him playing the title role, and that he was allowed to give the character some oomph from time to time. But on the flip side, at least Cillian Murphy's performance isn't reeking of craving an Oscar. A prime example of a performance craving an Oscar would be Natalie Portman's performance as Jackie, who destroyed the movie with her craving Oscar antics. Overall, Oppenheimer is an amazing watch, but don't get carried away by some critics' OTT, ludicrous, ridiculous hype of this movie. Don't get me wrong, it is a terrific movie and one of 2023's must-sees, but don't forget, Oppenheimer is a character study with emphasis on being extremely dialogue heavy. 8 out of 10.